7th grade, I wanted to really quickly go over the questions you answered the other day on the progressive era. You don't have to open up the old document you already turned in and add these changes. Just make some notes maybe somewhere if you miss some of the information. Okay? But anyway, here are the answers. Question number 1 asks the question, how did the following movements change America in the 1800s, starting with immigration? Well, immigration changed America because it increased the population of America. Immigration changed America because people brought their cultures, and that increased diversity. Immigration changed America because it led to xenophobia, where some people were scared of foreigners, a fear of foreigners. You had people from Southeastern Europe, Italians, Polish, Russian immigrants, even Chinese immigrants on the West Coast, and they brought their different religious viewpoints, they brought their different culture, language, all the things that are associated with culture, and many people also fearing for their jobs with all these new immigrants showing up, resented that fact and experienced this thing called xenophobia, fear of foreigners. I'm not really going to go over urbanization because you did a whole project on that about how New York City and all the cities were getting new things and how they were getting just larger, more modern. And finally, industrialization changed America because it made possible this kind of modern life we're familiar with today, where we have, you know, for them it was cities that were lit up, it was subways, kind of connected to the urbanization piece. But in order to provide these things, like the steel to make bridges and tall skyscrapers, it did take a toll on the environment, and that's one of the also effects of the industrial age or industrialization. And these really successful industries, like the steel industry, the coal industry, the railroad industry, they led to some people becoming very wealthy, like the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, but it also relegated many of the workers, most of the workers, the majority of them, to low wages and dangerous, unsafe, unhealthy, sometimes deadly working conditions. And so they try to address these problems in the progressive era, some of which were mentioned in this list. And these are the different groups who did so. Muckrakers, who were the writers of the period, who wrote in magazines and newspapers trying to expose some of the situations going on in America and the issues they faced. Politicians also tried to get involved. Conservationists tried to get involved. Women took a lot of the leadership in the progressive era. Now, what were their goals? Question number 3. Well, they wanted a safer society with better sanitation in the food industry. Upson Sinclair, we're going to talk about him if we haven't already. They wanted, and this is not everyone, because some people were all about one of these things. Some people were all about 2 or 3 or 4 of these things. Anyway, here, so I'm just listing off some of the many stated goals. Labor protections were included in that. They wanted to make sure people weren't working too many hours and they were safe. They wanted unions to have their rights. Women and kids wanted protection, whether it was voting, ending child labor, big businesses, breaking those businesses and breaking up those trusts because they were doing unfair things and they were destroying competition and were being unfair in some cases. They were concerned about corruption in the progressive era. Politicians were doing things. We're going to learn about a guy named Tammany Hall. He's well, not specifically Tammany Hall. Who's the guy I'm thinking of? My mind's going blank. Boss Tweed. Sorry. We're going to learn about Boss Tweed. He's a perfect example of a political machine. It's somebody who basically controls all the government and the political things happening in a city or a state, or yeah. And so they try to pass things like amendments and other things to try to control these types of folks. And then, of course, just things like moral reform, where they're trying to do things like, in this case, the 18th Amendment, prohibition. Alcohol was a real issue. It can still be a really big issue today in a lot of people's lives. And so they wanted to make it so that alcohol was out of reach of everyone, so that it was no longer a problem for people. We'll talk more about that one later as well. But these are just some of the stated goals. Now, number 4, which may have also been a kind of a tricky one, was what role did the government play? Well, the government was kind of elevated and empowered in this era. A bunch of new presidents were involved in making sure. So you kind of had presidents taking the lead in this era. And then you also had amendments being passed in Congress, some for voting rights and some for, like I said, prohibition. Anyway, so this is how the government is getting involved, whether it be presidents, senators, also local and state governments sometimes pass some laws like child labor laws and safety laws on in the factories. Like after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, they passed a law to protect the factory workers. And finally, at the end here, what groups of people did not all the progressives kind of get on board to try and help? What areas did the progressive era fall short? Number 5. And the answer to that is, first of all, with African Americans. The white women were able to get their voting right amendment passed there in the early 1900s, but it did not do much to help African American women. Jim Crow laws were all over the place, and none of those really changed. Lynching laws, if there were any on the books, and there weren't many, they weren't really being enforced in the South, where a lot of the lynching was taking place. And then, of course, for immigrants, there weren't really a lot of agreement among people about how much should be done to help immigrants assimilate, have better housing, learn English, get better jobs. There wasn't, once again, like this unified front to help and make the lives of immigrants better, although some people were trying to help make the lives of immigrants better. Anyway, I hope that answered any of the questions you had about the questions, and if not, feel free to message me somehow. Hope you guys are doing well and staying safe.